The one incident I can think of without the guitar was when I wrote the song I Had a Dream That You Died. I woke up from a dream that one of my friends had died, and I thought, similar to the I want to fall off the face of the earth and die lyric, I thought that the lyric I Had a Dream That You Died was just a funny, ridiculous opening lyric to a song.
Hey everybody, welcome back once again to The Record Process. This is the penultimate episode of Season 4, and we are just so excited to share this one with you. On this episode, we had the distinct pleasure of being joined by the incredibly talented and introspective songwriter, Mr. Kevin Sullivan, whose work is known largely by the name Field Medic. We talk about the creation of his latest album, Grow Your Hair Long If You Want to See Something That You Can Change. And we dive really deep into his philosophy for songwriting and how his musical pursuits have helped his mental health over the years. He explained how, with this album, he married a new sonic depth with sometimes blunt and almost journalistic lyrics. And he recalls what it was like to realize the possibilities that had opened up for him. And finally, he explains how he tapped into his signature full-time freestyle approach to songwriting in order to gather the bones of these songs, but he ultimately chose to dress them up as a full cohesive album instead of just another addition to his mixtape series. And it's all coming up right after this. So many of the albums that we'll be highlighting this season on The Record Process share one very important theme. And that's the idea of technology helping musicians and creators overcome the collaborative restrictions that once came along with geographic location. Thanks to companies like Audio Movers, real-time remote audio production and the tools that make it possible are more powerful than ever. Their groundbreaking Listen To plugin allows you to stream, record, and collaborate on high-quality audio in real time and is used on a daily basis by world-class audio engineers and professionals at places like Capitol and Abbey Road Studios. Their new Pro plan allows you to stream up to 150 users simultaneously, includes custom branding, and even allows you to stream MIDI data in real time. So head on over to audiomovers.com and enter the code RECORDPRO to get 1 month free off your Pro membership today. So as you already know, we do a lot of talking about the creation of original music here on The Record Process. I mean, that's kind of our thing. But it can also be fun to put your own spin on an old classic and tell the world something else about yourself through something like a cover song. Cover songs can be a really interesting way to connect with your existing fan base, or even a way to put yourself in front of new audiences through shared musical tastes. And our friends at DistroKid have made it super simple to upload a cover of your favorite song while allowing them to handle all of the back-end licensing work that can really be a headache for independent artists. DistroKid will notify the composer and publisher of its release, they will pay the necessary licensing fee, and they will take care of all the other legal red tape involved with releasing a cover song on a streaming platform, allowing you to fully focus on enjoying the process of putting your unique artistic spin on that recording. If you're already a DistroKid member, you can access this as you're uploading your track for $12 a year per song. Or if you're not yet a member and you'd like to sign up for DistroKid, you can use the link in our show notes to get 30% off of your first year's membership. Kevin Sullivan, also known as Field Medic, welcome to The Record Process. Thanks for hopping on and chatting with us today. How are you?
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'm doing good. Just have that sort of end of year relaxation. But I think as somebody who's usually very activated, I feel like I find myself chilling and relaxing and thinking that I should be doing something else. So I'm trying to just acclimate to the fact that there's not really much left to do at this time.
It's a tough task to really find that headspace, huh? Especially
Mm-hmm.
for someone like yourself, a songwriter, artist, performer. I think probably I'd venture to guess that most of the people, if you're listening to this, you probably understand that a little bit. How that kind of necessity to be doing and creating and being productive can really creep in. So yeah, especially this time of year, as we're taping this, it's like the lead up to Christmas and the holiday season and New Year's and all that right now. So it's Tom and I are kind of like racing to the finish line, doing a ton of interviews this week, which are all super fulfilling. But then it's kind of, I feel like I'm going to get to the end of the week and be like, we're done. I get to just do nothing for a week. That's weird. So, but I do love that for you.
It's always really hard to, manage that. So I totally feel that on on all fronts, my dude.
But before we wrap up, you in part of that accomplished feeling is due in part to the fact that you just put out a lovely record this year, which is titled "Grow Your Hair Long If You Wanted to See Something That You Can Change." Did I say that right?
If you're wanting to see something,
if you're wanting,
you were very close.
Okay.
Yeah.
Honestly, I was nervous. I was like, it should be easy. It rolls off the tongue, but if now I got to think about it. But yes, it is a lovely record, Kevin. And we asked you here to kind of unpack the journey that brought you, to its creation and release. And it was released back in October on Run for Cover, right? You've been a prolific songwriter, long before the release of this. Right? So maybe we start there for anybody that may not be familiar, and even those who are, you've done a lot of writing and recording on your own over the years, independently. So what does that generally look like with a lot of your previous albums?
So I used to play in a band called Rin Tin Tiger when I lived in San Francisco, and we were like a street band. We busked downtown all the time, and we had 3 records. And then sort of before we began recording the 3rd one, I had all these solo tracks that I was really interested in getting really deep into, like classic folk music, as well as like sort of modern stuff like The Tallest Man on Earth and this artist Fionn Reagan. And I was just like, hey, like I have all these tracks. Should we put out like an acoustic album or something? And I mean, I was still playing acoustic in that band, but it was more like rhythm and blues. I'm not sure what it was. It was like rock and roll. And they were like, I don't know, it kind of doesn't fit. So maybe you should start a different project. So that was the inception of Field Medic, was actually almost 10 years ago. In 2013, I put out my first EP called Crush Pennies that I recorded with my friend Derek. And that was a very like folksy. So as I said, the band, because the rhythm section was so strong, there was a lot of emphasis on kind of like rocking, which is something I do enjoy, but I think my real heart of hearts resides in more sort of slow fingerstyle, acoustic, kind of folky stuff. So that was the beginning. And that first release was digital. My friend Derek recorded it, as I said. And then shortly after that, my friend Carlos loaned me a Tascam Porta-Studio. And I felt immediately so much more comfortable recording myself in my room with just one SM58, like straight to cassette. And it sounded, it's kind of like, when you hear that recording and it finally sounds like how you think it should sound in your head. And I never really felt that way with the studio recordings I'd done with the band. So once I did the first EP on the 4-track, which is called Pegasus Thoughts, I was just fully addicted to recording. And that's when I just started releasing and recording like 3 EPs a year. I made a record called Light Is Gone. And then several years later in 2016, I wound up signing with Run for Cover, and they put out this sort of like compilation of like all my favorite songs from those previous releases, which is called Songs from the Sunroom. And then ever since, I've just been working with them.
It's so easy to relate for any musician where, if you've recorded or tried to fix your music or, into a tangible, like fixed medium, I think what you kind of described there, where you're like just feeling at home and like, this is what it should feel like when I'm done. This is, whatever that might be. And that's part of, figuring out your own sound and your own voice creatively, not just for musicians, but I think, artists in general, like figuring out this is the medium that I'm meant to work with, right? It wasn't like pencil and paper. It wasn't, it was actually clay, or it was actually, so I kind of love that. And it's so beautiful. And it so fits, just the overall ethos of, and the kind of world that you've built with the project and the song. So it feels very right. So I love, hearing that. And I think there's a lot to take out of that in terms of, making yourself comfortable as an artist in recording. And maybe that is, on a Porta Studio straight to cassette. Right. And so I think, then interestingly enough, fast forwarding to, talking about now this record and this new release, you took a bit of a different approach and kind of, you stepped out a little bit. And we wanted to talk a little bit about that because I think it's important. And one of the things we talk about a lot on the show, is kind of battling that uncertainty and extending some trust into maybe other things, other than yourself as a creative. And so I'm wondering what brought you to that when it came time to start, writing for this record and what the lead up to tracking it looked like in that time and place for you.
Yeah, so I had, in the following records, which are Fade Into the Dawn and Floral Prince, I had started doing a little bit of digital recording myself, like a little bit of multi-tracking in Logic for like a couple songs. But most of the Field Medic stuff, even on those two records, is live recording. I felt like because I was so taken with the way that it sounded live in my bedroom to an SM58 to cassette, I was like, okay, I can't do multi-tracking. It doesn't have the feeling. It doesn't have the spirit. And so I was kind of experimenting with that on the previous two albums. And also each of those albums has at least one or two like cassette songs too. And then I felt like going into this new record, I just sort of felt like I'd taken that as far as I could. And I didn't want to just make the same album, even if it's just in the sense of like the same fidelity, the same sound. I kind of wanted to push myself to try something different. And I wanted to make a record that was more dynamic and more like, as you said, extending a little bit of trust into a different producer, because up until this point, I'd only ever worked with my friend Derek, who I said recorded the first EP, and then my friend Tom EP in San Francisco, who did a handful of songs with me. So I reached out to my friend Gabe Goodman, who's a great producer and musician and songwriter. And I was just like, should we just give this a shot? Because I think that I felt like approaching the recording in a different way might inspire me to enjoy the process more, because I also had begun tracking some of the songs from this album myself. And it just wasn't hitting. It just felt weird. It felt labored over. And I didn't have the tool set within the computer to make them sound good, aside from just like very, very basic stuff. And I also, during the pandemic, I started this other side project called Paper Rose Haiku, which is like SoundCloud rap or something. I'm not sure what genre it would be, but that actually like got me a little bit more interested in working with the computer, because I obviously wasn't going to track rap songs to cassette, although I did consider it because I bet that would sound cool.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So I sort of just became fascinated with the grid, which I had detested for such a long time as a young Luddite busker.
Yeah.
And had been so untethered to.
Yeah. So and I was also like, to be honest, I was hella depressed in the time frame of writing the album, if that's not, clear from listening to it. And I also felt like
Yes.
it would be helpful to finish it if I had a co-pilot with Gabe. So
Yeah.
just sort of all those things together inspired me to just try something different.
Yeah. I mean, that's remarkable that, you talk about the first thing, wanting to like almost enjoy the process, and not just like someone to help you get across the finish line and really, continue, driving and pushing forward. But I think that's so important, especially for someone like yourself. The process has been your process and very personal for you, and having this fulfillment. And I think that's really wise, and shows a lot of understanding about yourself to say, hey, for the best, this would, I should really make sure that this process, maybe bringing someone else in to help, it be more fulfilling and be more validating and shake things up, because you might have been feeling a little stagnant, is I think really interesting. And the show's freaking called The Record Process. So clearly that's the bread and butter here. And that's interesting too, where I talk with a lot of artists about, how important it is to, get an experience out of making a record that you do love, especially if you want to continue doing it, because the second you start associating negative feelings with that creative process, you're going to be just like anything else. You're going to be less likely to want to come back to it. If you go to the gym and, you're going to be less likely to want to keep showing up when things get hard, but if you have a really good creative experience, fulfilling, not just coming out with a product that's good, I think that goes a long way. And especially for you, you've been making records for a while, so you could identify that. So I think that's a really interesting thing and part of that to mark off, and to your credit as well. But then you had someone like Gabe. What was the relationship there? Because you can't bring in just anybody to co-pilot with you.
I felt comfortable with Gabe because he was just a friend of mine. And I knew he'd produced for some songs for some of my friends, and I just felt really comfortable with him. He wasn't some random hotshot producer guy in some like big studio. He was working out of a sort of home studio as well. And I felt like he was the kind of person that I wouldn't feel shy, singing these lyrics in front of. And we had a really good, we had lots of jokes, lots of laughs in the studio. And so, yeah, he was a friend of mine. And I felt like he was a safe bet and someone that I knew would be able to elevate the recordings to the extent that he did.
When you went into the studio with Gabe, like how much of the album was written or not written at that point? Yeah,
that's actually a really interesting question. I think that, so I might have been exaggerating. I had been writing a different record at the time, like of potentially even darker, on a different side of darkness. And I had started recording those ones unsuccessfully. And then I wrote Always Emptiness, which is the first song of Grow Your Hair Long. I just remember that day, I didn't want to step back into my stew and try to record it. So like the very next day I texted Gabe and I said, let's try this. And then we went in and recorded like the following week. And that was sort of the process. For all the songs I did with Gabe, I would just generally write the song and then go in and record it with him like within a week. So they were all very fresh when I went into the studio. And because he was producing out the instrumentals and the drums and stuff, I didn't have to think about anything, which was cool. So I would just go in and play the song. But we did multi-track it because, as I said, I think making this rap project made me a little bit more comfortable with that. So I just play the guitar and then usually double the guitar. And then I do the vocals. And then we'd kind of get the rough, the foundation of the song. And that was it. And then he would just start kind of playing with it. And there'd be days where I'd just be sitting on the couch, like vaping while he's just playing bass and stuff. So that was the most of the process with Gabe, was just me laying down the bones and then him building the body.
You mentioned that Gabe was playing bass. Was there other personnel on the record?
So the only other person, there's two other people, is Nate Litch, who played drums on the album. And he is also now drumming in my live band. And he was great to work with because it was very similar. Like he would just come over and be at the studio for like an hour and a half. And he's a really, really good drummer and just lay down a sick beat. And that was it. And then Jody, after the record was finished, we sent it out to Jody and they laid pedal steel and dobro on some of the songs. And then also there's one other person named John who put some strings on the very last song, but it was mostly myself and Gabe and then Nate and Jody.
Oh, amazing. And for the most part, they were just kind of feeling the vibe that you and Gabe already curated at that point, right?
Yeah, I think like my philosophy with songwriting and recording is what I call full-time freestyle, which is sort of a rule I have in place to not really overthink things too much. So when Nate was playing on the songs or Jody was playing on the song, I was just like, just just do what feels chill. I'm not like really tripping about it that much. I just I know that you are capable musicians, and so just give it the sauce.
Totally. Have you had a negative experience in that manner that like you're like, no, I have to stick by this rule, as far as like an experience where someone was like, no, the kick pattern has to be this, and like you're just like, never again?
Yeah, I think that was sort of something I experienced in my old band, because my old band was a little bit more of a democracy. And that's totally chill. But I would feel like there were times where, and I kind of have OCD as well. So I think earlier on there was, my old band had 3 band members and everybody had an idea of what it was supposed to be. And I hadn't engaged the full-time freestyle button yet. So like when I was doing vocal takes, that was multi-tracking too, just to sort of speak to why I started to love live recording after that. I'd be like, oh, the way I said "and" is like so weird. You can really get with a microscope with vocal takes specifically. I mean, if you're the singer, or even like, oh, my guitar string has this weird buzzy sound, and it would just drive me crazy. And I think that, going to the cassette and recording live really took all the possibility of tripping about stuff like that out, because it was more so, does this take have a good vibe? I'm down. Like, it's over. I can't punch in this live take. So that was just kind of how I started building that philosophy. So yeah, I think there is some subconscious negative experiences that informed that way of thinking.
Yeah.
Developing an artist philosophy, like you mentioned, I think is really important. Even if you don't like talk about it, or like you don't have to have it like on a poster on your wall and, or something, but like, something that helps you guide each scenario and each set of decisions to be like, okay, it's almost a tool to get over a hurdle, or, whenever you kind of get lost in the weeds, and be like, okay, this is what, is important to me when it comes down to like the bare minimum. So, and I think that goes to show it's like, it would be very tough to be as prolific of a songwriter, if you held things as close and tried to like, cherry pick everything and really slice and dice it. So thankfully your, fascination with the grid hadn't come until now, and you were able to formulate that.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for the grid until now. And now I think I can use that low key mindset, and then also ideally create something that's super, as I said, my big inspiration behind this record was trying to make something more dynamic, because a lot of my stuff is just guitar, voice, and maybe a drum machine. Hearing the pedal steel and, Gabe's really incredible bass player, really cool bass lines, and just like now I can appreciate the grid for what it is by being like, let's lay like a 6-part harmony on this thing, or let's go back and rewrite the entire drum part because we can. So, but now I just feel I'm like excited about it. Whereas before I think there was some trepidation or fear or some bias against it subconsciously.
Of course, yeah.
You've evolved to use it responsibly.
Yes, yeah.
Well,
if you will, grid responsibly.
Oh boy. So, like on this Field Medic release, then was there a moment where you're like, "Oh my god, this would have never happened"? I guess this is a 2-parter. One, if you didn't take this outside of your brain. That's the first one. Maybe a little bit of a softball here. But the second one is there something that came of this full-time freestyle mindset that like there was a moment on the record that you're like, this is the epitome of this mindset?
Well, I think doing the record digitally, multi-track with a producer was, to my experience, almost a full-time freestyle in and of itself, even though that is normal for most people, to do the opposite of what I would normally do. And I think the big oh my god moment for me was actually, as I said, the first song we did was Always Emptiness, which was the first track of the album. And I remember hearing the first bounce with the drums on it and just being like, dude, this is so emo. Like, I love this. I've never heard something like so lush, because a lot of my recordings are kind of 2-dimensional. And so hearing the piano and the harmonies and the super like roomy drums, I was just like, this sounds like, it's funny. I feel like the lyrical substance of this record is a little bit I'm not going to, I think that it's sonically very mature, but I think the emotional aspect of it is sort of not, it's very like raw. So I don't want to say it's immature, but it's like almost like it's just like a journal entry. Like there's some of my other music has a lot of like, I think a lot about metaphors and like poetry and stuff. And this one, I was just kind of talking about how I was feeling very bluntly. And I think that the marriage of the sort of mature sonics and the just blunt journal lyrics really helped it feel like it wasn't like this cloying. I think if I had recorded the whole record on like I have one EP that I made on one of those like tabletop cassette things. It's like a rectangle called Fuck You Grim Reaper. And the reason I say cloying is because somebody on like Metacritic said that the record was like a cloying journal entry from like a preteen, which is pretty funny. But I think that this record may have been more cloying had it been super lo-fi. So I was just really pleased that these songs that were so difficult for me to even consider, I had no choice but to write them, even though I didn't really want to. I wish I was writing something like more funny and fun and lighthearted, but getting to hear it through the lens of really nice, accompaniment was my oh my God moment. And that continued to happen with every song that me and Gabe made.
Doing that hard, almost like labor intensive, introspective storytelling justice in its own way in terms of affixing it into that medium. I mean, wow, that's it's an incredible way of looking at it and said expertly. If you're an audio engineer or musician that's dedicated to creating and releasing new music consistently, then you already know that process can be long, complex, and often expensive, especially while you're trying desperately not to sacrifice the type of quality that is crucial for your mixes to stand up to those big budget productions. Producer and friend of the record process, Jay Moss, has reimagined these roadblocks to quality that plague us all. With the help of world-renowned sound engineers, Jay developed an AI-based platform called Master, which offers you the ability to quickly upload your song and receive a high-quality mastered edition in minutes, all at a price point that won't break the bank with each new mix revision. The platform also allows you to easily collect feedback from clients and collaborators, and it even caters to the perfectionist in us all by allowing you to quickly compare and contrast different iterations of each track as you make those final subtle tweaks. So for a limited time this season, you as a Record Process listener can not only try Master for free, but you can also receive a 20% discount on your first membership by using the code PROCESS on their website at checkout. So hit the link in our show notes or visit maastr.io for more info. So a lot of people think that Oxford Pennant makes, pennants. The triangular wool flag type things that usually have like a sports team's logo or the name of a place printed on them. Well, to be honest, that is what I thought too before my band, The Wonder Years, had the chance to work with them. Through that process, we realized just how much care they put into their beautifully crafted, iconic keepsakes that remind us who we are and why we do what we do. They've teamed up with some massive artists in the process, bands like My Chemical Romance, Wilco, and 21 Pilots, just to name a few. And they even offer custom shop orders for artists, companies, and unique events or special occasions. So please do yourself a favor and head over to oxfordpennant.com and use the code RECORD15 to receive 15% off your first retail purchase from their web store. My next question, which delves deep into the lyrics and the stories that you're telling, which are highly personal here and are also not, super lighthearted at times, as you said, right? And you in that way have crafted, your own kind of stylistic voice and of lyricism across other releases. And I think the first thing that I'm curious about for you as a songwriter, and perhaps it was different with this one because of the circumstances that you found yourself in and condition you found yourself in, but perhaps it wasn't. How do you carve out that kind of space for introspection like that as an artist, and to be able to pull those things out of yourself? So was that part of the reason why maybe you didn't want to spend as much time trying to like dress things up metaphorically, or, you know, what do you have to do to kind of do that as a songwriter? Because I think there's some really great lyrical approaches to all of these things that, you know, it bears repeating. It's not easy to do, obviously.
Yeah. So I think like, you know, I guess I began writing the album in the middle of 2021. I wouldn't say that the album is like a COVID album. It doesn't really have anything to do with it. But I do think that period of time when we were all locked down for, at that point, a year and a half, I did start to have that songwriter thought that I think we all have, where it's like, am I out of tracks? Like, what am I going to talk about? Like, all I do at this point is like sit around at my house and drink White Claw and like chain smoke. And so there was sort of a period where there was no tracks. I mean, there was tracks. I was always making tracks, but I wasn't really like feeling them in that way. And then there was just some sort of like personal situations that happened like one after another, that were just completely like mind blowing. And I found myself very disassociated for months. Actually, I was just like, I feel like I was just staring at the ceiling, dumbstruck by what I was trying to process. And eventually I just picked up the guitar and I just started strumming. I have like a blueprint of chords I like to play, like C to F to G to A minor. There's actually like many. I just told everybody how to play like half of my discography. So I started just strumming my classic chords. And I remember just sitting outside. It was the summer. And I just started singing that lyric, I want to fall off the face of the earth and probably die. And I like to talk about things in a sort of hyperbolic manner like that, because it, you know, while I'm singing it, I do mean it, but it's also kind of making me smirk because it's so absurd. I'm sort of an absurdist. I find that sort of thing very funny. So I just kind of followed that thought, and that was, as I said before, the first song I wrote for the album, as well as the first one I recorded. So the following songs all just kind of came about in the same way, where I was just chilling and being confused, and I would just start strumming and just kind of write the songs. Like, I didn't write any of these songs down. I just kind of pulled them out of my head and made them come to life, which is, you know, sort of harkens back to another part of the full-time freestyle philosophy. I've written songs like that before too, where it's just kind of like I'm just sort of talking about what's going on. And I think the difference with these ones is that they were then dressed up as a full album, because I have a couple of things called full-time freestyle mixtape 1 through 6. And those I recorded, I would just make the song up. I would press record and make the song up on the spot. And then those are out on Bandcamp. So this was kind of like an extension of that practice, because I did like do some editing and revision. You know, I was like recording a voice memo and kind of like figure out the words, but it wasn't like some of my other songs where, you know, I'll write a bunch of haikus, or I'll write like a big poem and then I'll pull out the most expressive words and kind of fit them together over a really nice guitar part. This was more just sort of an exorcism of weird feelings.
Yeah, you're kind of immersing the listener straight into the process, you know, they're there at that same almost like conceptualization point, which is really fascinating.
That's actually really interesting. Yeah, there's like no filter between when that thought hit me and when it hits their ears.
Yeah, and it's very rare that you get that.
Yeah, I mean, typically you hear about like that stream of consciousness, like in relation to like literary stuff. And yeah, like Case was saying, I feel like that the ability to do that and just pull that and marry that with music is even more so cool. And I don't know what the word is to say, like, that's really cool.
Thank you.
Like, there's no elegant way. Clearly, I don't have that ability.
Yeah, but that's Tom's stream of consciousness, and it lands with cool. Answer me this then: the picture you're framing of kind of that moment of creation. It's you with the guitar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any points where, you know, it's just you and no guitar, or do you think, because as a guitar player myself, I feel like, and you mentioned like, I have the chordal blueprint that you start strumming. And that kind of made me think it's like for anybody out there, it's like, if starting to be like, oh, I got to write a song. And even if it's not guitar, right? Maybe it's keys, maybe it's, something else, right? I feel like the second you almost start to be like, I want to tap into this, and you like go to a certain chord, right? Or start strumming a progression. What do you think happens, and how would you describe like that process? Could you do it without the guitar, or does the guitar kind of make your brain relax and allow that kind of stuff to start coming up? Because I think there's something there, and that's exactly what you're describing, I feel like.
That's a really interesting question. I think that there is definitely one incident I can think of without the guitar was when I wrote the song I Had a Dream That You Died. I woke up from a dream that one of my friends had died. And I thought, similar to the I want to fall off the face of the earth and die lyric, I thought that the lyric I Had a Dream That You Died was just a funny, ridiculous opening lyric to a song. And the melody was like in my head too. So I like grabbed my phone and I was singing like, I had a dream that you died, na 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 na, and then I like went back to sleep. And then I woke up the next day and I started strumming and sort of put that together. But that was also at that point in the record, I swear to God, there's like 4 or 5 songs on the album that are all literally the exact same chord progression, but like the capo is moved up and they're in a slightly different order. So that song, I remember I was like, I have to start this song on like a G shape instead of a C shape. And I like can't go to the F too soon. So that was definitely one without the guitar. And I'm sure there was other incidences of that. Like sometimes I just think of a lyric. Usually I tend to go for walks periodically throughout the day. Otherwise I go crazy. So sometimes I'm just walking and, whatever it is I'm contemplating on this walk, sometimes a sort of phrase springs forth that's either sounds poetic or, is absurd or, whatever it may be. And I'll like write that down or just take a mental note and try and like toss that in a song. So I will say though that I feel like for me, songwriting, the most important thing, it's always been that the song is like a vessel for lyrics. I really love lyrics. I love writing. I wanted to be a poet. And then I realized that my written poetry is like not that good. So I was like, but if I sing it, I feel like it's a little bit better. So it's always just a vessel for the words. So the words to me are very important. But I will say that to speak to your point about having the guitar and sort of like relaxing into that rhythm, it does actually help kind of pull it out. Because when I was a kid, when I first started having panic attacks, I don't know if you've ever had that, but it's very disarming when it happens. And the first thing that I found that helped me was if I picked up my guitar and I just started strumming and singing. Like I think therapists talk about, naming 4 things in the room or something like that. And without knowing that practice, I was just kind of doing that. Like I would just sit on my bed and play a G chord and be like, the carpet is dirty or whatever, just sort of sing my way out of that feeling. So I think the music, strumming the guitar, I'm very I used to be a yo-yoer, a sponsored yo-yoer, and I can like juggle. I used to be like a magician. I feel like I'm always doing 2 things at once. So it really helps my mind relax when my hands are busy. So the guitar definitely like plays that role in kind of slowing down my physical body to let my brain slow down and process a little bit.
Oh, I think there's definitely something there. Yeah.
A follow-up question to that. Do you find that different instruments or different, like in this case, different guitars speak to you differently as far as like this acoustic guitar tells me this G chord to this A minor, that's this guitar. And then like this electric guitar, that's this other capo 3 all day.
Yeah. I think I remember reading some interview with some folk artist about how like the guitars have the songs in them. And I think that there's definitely something to that theory where I find that when there was this one incident where I was borrowing one of my friend's guitars for a tour because my guitar broke and I was just instantly writing hella tracks. And it was like, I think it's just feeling a different guitar. Like it wasn't like I knew what track to write from the guitar, but sort of playing around on the different guitar. And specifically like I'm really into secondhand stuff because I think that there's something different about randomly acquiring whatever guitar my friend could let me borrow versus like buying a new one. Because I think when you buy something new, there's these expectations. And so there was hidden tracks in my friend's guitar that I don't think I would have discovered if I had just gone to Guitar Center and bought some random guitar. I do think
love that.
I think there's definitely, at the very least, I think different instruments, even if they're, different iterations of the same instrument, inspire different things based on their tone and their feel and the action and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Tom, we're on the same wavelength right now, because my follow-up question was actually going to be what you mentioned when you said, yeah, that's pretty much, every song, in the discography just capoed differently. My question was going to be, if does capoing a guitar at a different fret, especially as a vocalist, intuitively and inherently it must push you in a slightly different direction because it's a key. Because objectively, like everything, like, from relative harmony standpoint, like the outside listener, if you just play the same progression, might not realize the difference right away. But you as a vocalist, if you're singing, humming along, or having a thought, your body notices a difference. And I mean, if we want to get like one level deeper into the woo-woo kind of element of it, it's like all of the frequencies kind of resonate. If we're talking like binaural beats, which Tom, you can school us on later. I don't fully get it still, but like resonant frequencies and energies, they're all different, right? And so even a guitar, like an acoustic, right, it resonates differently because of the proportions of it, and different, like, and a room resonates and likes one key. I raise this to anybody that's ever like played like loud band style in a small room where the walls and windows and everything's like, really shakes, but you hit that one note on a bass guitar and everybody knows what, and it's a different one in every room, and it just, the whole thing freaks out. And I feel like it's kind of like that with like some instruments really like this, or like even as a singer, like, hey, open, like this acoustic guitar open feels great, but the second you slide it up to like and capo it at the third fret, you want to lean into a different chord or a different, something melodically and every vocalist has their different range. You want to do different things. So I wonder, did you find anything like that? Why do you usually play with capoing it? Or were there any songs on this record that definitely changed or veered, into a different lane because, you capoed them for a certain reason?
I love that question. I think first thing that it brings to mind is that I think that when I'm singing like high as I want to go, it's like a D, I think. So sometimes I'm trying to write a song where, let's say, the first chord is a G and it's kind of like a struggle. But if I put the capo on like the 6th fret, I'm not sure what that changes it to, but then I can sing that exact same song, but lower, like in the same tone or something. So that can be helpful putting the songs together, because I don't want to be in my room screaming my head off, trying to sing this high G song. And I think that, as I said, there's these few chords that I don't know exactly when I discovered that they were my favorite chords to play, but I'm so familiar with them. And it's so easy for me to write vocals over the top of them, that because I know my brain knows where they're going to go. So I think in some ways it's just a way to keep making new songs with the same chords when I move the capo up. But an interesting, capo moment with this record is that the song I Think About You All the Time was originally written on a beat for my rap project. And it was like super falsetto and like sounded very like emotional and a little bit ridiculous perhaps. And I remember like one of my favorite genres of music is sort of that like adult contemporary acoustic radio pop, like Colby Calais or like Howie Day, or all those classics. I was thinking about the lyrics of that song, and I didn't really feel like the rap version was like gonna make the cut. So I just took a capo and I popped it on the 6th fret, and I started playing the classic chords that I've mentioned many times and just singing that same melody. And I was like, okay, this could be like this could be my one shot at an adult contemporary radio pop song, which I also think that this record desperately needs because every other song is the most bleak song known to man. But that was a little bit more of just a genre swap. But I have a lot of songs too that there was a time period when I was really invested in becoming really good at fingerstyle guitar. So like there's a lot of songs in my discography that are like in open D or dadgad that are sort of what I would refer to as shredders. But as I said, I wasn't like, I felt like there was a sort of lack. I didn't have the motivation to shred on this record. So I just kind of stuck to what I know because I knew that I needed to get these feelings out and I wanted to make an album because I love making albums and it just wasn't time for me to shred. So I just stuck to the classics.
I love that.
Oh man, that all makes so much sense. I love it so much, especially like listening to the record too. It really, I mean, I see that and I hear that and I think a lot of people too, songwriters and and as an artist, like there's such deep, like overwhelming senses of things that they, you're like, as a songwriter, I know I should write about this. I know it has to come out of me. I just don't really want to right now, or whatever range of that emotion might be. I definitely hear that. And I like that resonates with me and I'm sure many other people. And in this case, making the decision of like, hey, it doesn't have to be a shredder. Like I just, what can I do to get the words out, and that's back to, kind of that like art, artistic philosophy and understanding like what's important to you, and it's not letting things get in the way, not letting yourself overthink it. And in this case, if you were taking a shred approach, right, and be like, let me come up with a cool dadgaddy riff, that might've gotten in the way, So, I mean, it all makes a ton of sense. And maybe, there's a time and a place for that. So, who's to say that there won't be plenty of shredding in the future? But that's awesome. And that's why, so much we wanted to zero in and poke at about this record, because now kind of knowing that and understanding the context of it all, it really, really almost makes it that much heavier and that much richer as a piece of work, dude. I really appreciate you taking the time, Kevin, to kind of unpack all of this for everybody. We're big fans of what you do, the writing you do. Congratulations on getting the record out. For anybody that wants more of it or might not be familiar with this project or, wants to go find and dive deep into your back catalog of songs, where should they follow you? Where can they go get all that stuff? Shout it out right now so everybody can take it in.
Yeah. So the most of the main stuff is on, if you look up Field Medic on any of the streaming platforms. If you want to go deep into some unreleased music, there is a handful of EPs on fieldmedic.bandcamp.com. There's even more secret EPs on Sunroom Records and salon.bandcamp.com, records spelled with a Z. And there's actually even more secret tracks just on my YouTube channel, which is, I think it's _fieldmedic. And then Instagram _fieldmedic for glamour shots, Twitter _fieldmedic for silly thoughts, and that's about it.
Awesome.
Glamour shots and silly thoughts and secret tracks on secret tracks.
Yeah, secret tracks on secret tracks. Amazing. Awesome.
Brilliant. Perfect. Thank you so much. We will talk to you soon.
Dude, thanks so much for having me. This is so fun. I really appreciate it.
Okay, we cannot thank Kevin enough for that interview. It gave us so much to think about, whether you're a musician or a producer. So many great songwriting gems in there to unpack as well. Top of which I think is the way he talked about the power of an unfiltered thought, and the way we explored how he tried to bridge the gap between the moment of an idea's conception and its final translation. I think it's important to remember that the job of everyone involved in making a record is to collectively ensure that the character and weight of an idea is not diluted or blurred by the way you choose to capture and ultimately present it. Those choices should always be secondary to the core of an idea with the goal of highlighting it or supporting it. And after 55 episodes of this show, I think I'm starting to realize that that's why I love this podcast format so much. It's because it allows us to bring those thoughts to you unfiltered and straight from the source, straight from the people that make these records, and the people that make these records what they are, and the people whose ideas make these records great. So with only one more episode left in this season, I'd like to ask for your thoughts. Feedback is such an important part of growing as a creative, and we are very much invested in making this show as enjoyable and valuable to you as possible in the seasons to come. So with that in mind, here are 3 things you can do with minimal effort that will make a huge impact on this community of listeners and the show moving forward. First, scroll down to the show notes section on whatever platform you're listening to this on right now. There you'll find a link to a short survey. Take a minute and leave us your honest thoughts, comments, and suggestions. And as a thank you, we'll be picking a few listeners to receive a special limited edition gift pack from our friends at Oxford Pennant and TOPO CHICO. And if you've been following along with us on Instagram, you may have already caught a few of our Season 4 guests showing off a few of these items. Which brings me to number 2. Make sure you're following us on Instagram at The Record Process. And go ahead and turn on notifications so you don't miss all the bonus video content and all the updates that we'll have for you following the season finale next week. And finally, you'll find unique mobile links to rate and review the show on Spotify or Apple Podcast. I cannot understate how much this helps the show reach other people just like you. So pay it forward and drop us some kind words and some stars, preferably 5, on whatever platform you're using. And after that, the only thing left to do is come join us next week for the season finale of
The Record Process.